So welcome to Session 3 of the Universal Peace Federation's International Leadership Conference of 2020. This session highlights the International Association of Parliamentarians for Peace and is focused on opportunity and hope at a time of global crisis, Africa, continent of the future. Now, my name is Heather Vokush, and it is my distinct honor to be asked to moderate this session. We will commence with 5 very esteemed speakers, each providing a brief initial statement. Before we begin, however, may we please note that our speakers will be presenting in multiple languages. As such, please find the simultaneous interpretation function in the Zoom toolbar at the bottom of your screen, and just choose whichever translation version you prefer. If you have any questions whatsoever, then just go to the chat section and you can ask. There are people there who are more than happy to be of support. Now, our esteemed speakers today include His Excellency Delfim Santiago das Neves, who is President of the National Assembly of Sao Tome and Principe. We have the Honorable Hilik Bar, who is the former Deputy Speaker of the Knesset in Israel. We have His Excellency Tini Hosseini, who is President of the National Assembly in Niger. We have the Honorable Kazi Murad Omarov, who is a member of the State Duma in Russia. And we also have the Right Honorable Rebecca Kadaga, who is Speaker of the Parliament in Uganda. In addition, the coordinator of IAPP Europe and Middle East, which is Peter Heider, will provide perspective on the work of the International Association for Parliamentarians for Peace at the end. So we have a very, very full program and very exciting. And without further ado, let us begin by welcoming the Honorable Hilik Bar. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you so much, Ms. Heather, for this amazing work, and I welcome all the participants from Jerusalem, from the Holy Land. And first, it's really a huge pleasure to be here at the ILC conference of the UPF, which is an amazing organization and highly important one, that don't think that the COVID-19 is a reason to go under construction and actually continue its effort for peace, because it's always, we always have a necessity to promote peace and to strengthen the things that are so important for us. So I want to thank Dr. Walsh, UPF, for having this great work. And I have to admit that this item that we're dealing with, Africa, is really close to me. I have to admit that since the day I took some small break from politics, after quite a lot of years in politics, I gave a big part of my time to Africa. And I have to admit, I fell in love with Africa. I fell in love with the people of Africa. In just a few visits that I had in Africa in my political career, among them, by the way, in Uganda, where I met Honorable Rebecca Kadaga, I may say my good friend, my very talented friend, that hosted me in the parliament in Kampala. And I want to send a very big shalom to Rebecca and to the people of Uganda, which I love so much. So during the last year, I was actually took time aside of my usual business to be an activist in the also in the amazing organization named Empower Africa, which is an Israeli but also an international organization founded by Mr. Ezi Rappaport, who actually moved from the US to Jerusalem, finding himself dealing with Africa and founding Empower Africa with a vision to promoting and advance and advocating for the development in Africa. So actually, our first mission as Israelis who wants to empower Africa is first to create a significant and deep awareness in Africa, on Africa in Israel, and actually also worldwide. We want to make people realize that currently Africa is in many, many ways, plus geographically, the center of the world, and people should know that. And it's important to note and understand, for example, that only in 30 years, into 2050, 1/3 of the people under the age of 30 will be living in Africa. And this is a huge fact that we should pay attention to and get ready to deal with. 1/3 of the population under the age of 30 will live in Africa in 2050. People worldwide should realize that Africa is a continent with 54 countries, and also realize that Africa is a huge and highly important continent strategically, politically, and economically. What people don't know, for example, is that there is a lot of transformation happening today in Africa, and that actually Africa is the home of some of the top 10 fastest growing economies in the world. Not a lot of people are aware of this fact, and mainly not the international community and the world economy. And we should make them be aware of that. So after creating an awareness or this awareness, it is very important for us also to emphasize the importance for the international community to increase their attention and their actions to Africa. The international community should understand that there are around 600 million people as we speak, many of which are living without clean water and electricity, and with the population growing, we should ask ourselves where these people in Africa will be in 2050. It can go to two directions. One of development and flourishing, and the other one is to the wrong side. And all of us as world leaders, as parliamentarians, should make sure that it will go to the right side. The international community, Ms. Heather, should also understand that people in Africa today are moving more and more from the villages and rural areas to the big cities in search of better healthcare facilities, water, education, and electricity, and also in order to advance their life. But we should ask ourselves, does these cities can successfully absorb them and offer them a proper life? I'm not sure. We should also pay attention to this. And therefore, it is important that we as international leaders will deal with this matter now and not tomorrow. So as Empower Africa and as Israelis who are acting these days in Africa, we first choose to focus and highlight all the positive that there is in Africa. And there is a lot of positive things in Africa. We choose to focus on the advantages that Africa have, and mainly in the huge potential that Africa have, and in the opportunities that Africa have to offer us as foreigners, as world economy, as people who care about Africa. So there is a tremendous potential in Africa, and there are a lot of amazing and highly smart and highly committed people in Africa who are waiting to fulfill this potential together with us. One of the main ways to empower Africa and fulfill its potential is, of course, through business, high-tech, and innovation. And I think that the only way to drive sustainable and scalable solutions is through strengthening the African economy and not necessarily through charity. So what we should do is actually build a mutually benefiting partnerships and relationship, not only between federal governments, like I did with the Honorable Kadega a couple of years ago, but maybe mainly between local governments, between local companies, and you know what, maybe even mainly between grassroots and the people of the world and the people of Africa. So Empower Africa is about enhancing positive awareness on Africa without focusing on the usual media narrative of corruption, extreme poverty, and civil war, as the media tends to negatively highlight many times, and not necessarily in the potential and the huge opportunities that Africa should offer. I will end by saying that Empower Africa, as we see it, is about emphasize the importance to act now within a focus on trade, sustainable solutions, and mutually benefiting partnership relationships, and also highlighting specific opportunities that Africa can offer. We do it as an Israelis, we do it as a business community. I did it as a politician, but I think that we should connect once again all of these factors in order to promise that in 2050 and maybe even in 2030, Africa will be much better. It is amazing as we speak. It's truly amazing, but it can be with the potential that it has, it can be much, much more than this. So I will put a stop here and thank you again for listening with her.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency, for that impassioned and such an eloquent statement regarding the importance of Africa demographically, strategically, economically, politically, and the urgency to indeed empower Africa. Thank you so much again. Next, what we would like to do is to invite our next esteemed speaker, and we will now turn to His Excellency Delfim Santiago das Neves, who is President of the National Assembly, São Tomé and Príncipe. Sir, the floor is yours.
Quero, antes de mais, cumprimentar a todos os colegas oradores, particularmente aos meus homólogos, saudar igualmente a digníssima senhora moderadora e a todos quantos estão a nos acompanhar nesta importante conferência virtual. Constitui para mim, enquanto Presidente da Assembleia Nacional de São Tomé e Príncipe, motivo de grande orgulho participar na qualidade de orador honorífico principal nesta Conferência Internacional de Liderança, razão pela qual exprimo os meus melhores agradecimentos à Federação para a Paz Universal, sob a liderança da doutora Ak Jamun, por tão relevante convite. Permitam que comece por considerar de todo oportuno o tema do presente encontro, que surge sob o impulso de
theme of this meeting is included in several groups. The effects of a pandemic that we have to fight now. And this pandemic is spreading in an unbelievable way, and it's affecting several countries, which is a real fear from the point of view of the consequences. The situation is getting worse. The economy is being very much affected, especially in the countries of low economical development. If they don't prevail from now on in the international community, these values, the values of harmony, freedom, cooperation, and peace. In regards to Africa, a continent that has been fighting for the prosperity of its people, which is the result of centuries of domination, of exploration. It has opportunities and hope with which these new generations live, and they are conscious that this is a democratic context and social justice, and we can obtain this future with success. For this reason, the moment has come for the UPF, with the several problems that is confronting humanity now, may invest in the realization of this conference. As always, faithful to its goal to create opportunities of dialogue and the construction of peace amongst its representatives from governments, religions, cultures, education, and civil society, and a shared commitment of cooperation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency, for sharing those very, very important observations on the importance of dialogue, a democratic context, and social justice in terms of dealing with so many of the very urgent issues that we have now. Thank you again so much for sharing your thoughts with us today. And next, we are very honored to turn to His Excellency Tini Oseni, President of the National Assembly of Niger. Sir, the floor is yours.
Merci. Bonjour.
Thank you. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. I am the President. Mr. President, speakers, ladies and gentlemen, I am happy to find myself once again with all of you across distance through the screen. Our topic of the day appears to be a paradox. Indeed, while the COVID-19 pandemic is perceived as a major break on economic growth, social ties, and international relations, how then to speak of it in terms of opportunity and hope? Thus, by a way of illustration, for the countries of the Economic Community of West African States, also known as ECOWAS, the ECOWAS space, the immediate consequence of COVID-19 will have been a gradual entry into recession with a contraction estimated at -2.1% for the year 2020. In terms of public finances, here and there are decreases in tax revenues and significant budget deficit, a deterioration of basic social sectors with the corollary of an increase in unemployment, in short, a worsening of poverty. On the African scale, some believe that this pandemic could push more than 27 million more people into extreme poverty. However, from this great challenge of COVID-19, it is possible to identify useful opportunities because, as we learn from the Holy Quran, the difficulty is always neighbor to the easy. Our reflection on today's theme will be illustrated by a few selected examples from several areas. Thus, it is first to find actions and so as to have debates for the Q&A to be more rich. Thus, within the framework of the fight against the pandemic, our country is organized through, in particular, the African Free Trade Area, can much better attract the attention of the international community with the hope of having as much support as necessary to respond to the pandemic, only to achieve the sustainable development goals and those of Agenda 2063 within the framework of international relations based on solidarity, equality, justice, and dignity. Those are the counter values that we already had to explain during our last intervention. To do this, they will be able to collectively develop the pleas necessary to mobilize funding in the manner of a real Marshall Plan, that we always ask for, through which each of the countries of the North would finally keep the promise to devote 0.7% of its GDP to public aid to the development. In short, be about ensuring that the financial response of the international community against COVID-19 serves as a lever for all development aid. For this lever to be more effective, it is imperative that together, all countries around the world, through the United Nations, the UN, define the rules of this new political and economic governance that will be based on much more human values, much more human and ecological values. Internally, from the constraints arising from the management of the pandemic, we must be able to draw lessons that can improve our social relations and the organization condition of our economies. When it comes to social relations, hygiene measures or social distancing, and the wearing of masks that people find restrictive can be used as permanent means of medical prophylaxis to counter the diseases that endemics that regularly plague our families. Even if later the mask could be abandoned, the reduction of social promiscuity and hygiene measures especially could continue and become reflexes of collective safeguard. In terms of management, teleworking, having proven its effectiveness, can become a great opportunity to improve work performance with significant savings, especially in terms of transport and travels. The other positive effect of this economy of means is undoubtedly the general easing of the effects of economic action on the environment. Already it seems from the present year, humanity will have already gained nearly a month on the day of overrun of the use of natural resources compared to the last year. The challenge now is how, in the future, to capitalize on this victory while maintaining economic activity at a level compatible with sufficient growth and optimal growth in regard with the ecological constraints. To meet this challenge, we need to fundamentally review our consumption and lifestyle habits. This is possible because if in 2020 we have done it under constraint and forcefully, we will still be able to do it in the future by deliberate, thought out and organized decisions. It will be a matter of defining new economic paradigms, new lifestyles, new social relationships. This would be the best proof that an obstacle can be turned into an asset, because as everyone knows, environmental activists or not, if the current industrial civilization were to keep the same pace of evolution, all life on Earth could be threatened. Containment, quarantine, curfews, and especially the fear aroused by the pandemic have shown us that we can live on little, that we can live without producing excess carbon dioxide by limiting the movement of planes and other ultra-polluting ships. The pandemic has led to a significant reduction of oil consumption, which anticipated the development of renewable energy favorable to a cleaner planetary collective life. This irreversible orientation undoubtedly announces a new energy revolution. What is the new role? What is now, in front of all this change, the new role of parliaments in this context of structural change? The answer is very simple. To accomplish there are three main missions with more courage and discernment. And even in some cases, we have to see together with all institutions the role of parliamentary if needed. Within the framework of the legislative mission, the vision must be entirely new, even revolutionary. Laws should no longer be adopted routinely or mechanically. If the lesson of the pandemic is to be useful, a new legislative project that will redefine all economic and social life will have to begin in the social and sporting field. Standards adapted to the context of collective safeguarding must be designed and adopted. In the world of work, teleworking will have to be codified and employer and employee relations redefined. In the area of international relations, parliaments must pursue their efforts to harmonize legislation and also efforts to integrate regional and sub-regional spaces. As such, the legislative tools for the AFTA, the African Free Trade Area, must be ratified by all. With the regarding parliamentary oversight mission, we must also continue to innovate by going beyond methods based on the plenary debate around the questions whose answers prepared by obscure officials are read mechanically by ministers who know that there is no sanction that they can fear from the elect. Faced with the expected major economic and social changes, parliamentary oversight must borrow their tools from auditing the results-based management in order to lead gradual adaptation of the practice of evaluation of public policies by the elected ones. As regards to the mission of representation, parliaments will henceforth have to become more open to citizens and involve them in the preparatory phase of the legislative procedure so that the law is better accepted because it is less and less vertical, meaning that we have to prepare every forces of a country. So the civil society has to be included. By virtue of proximity to them, parliamentarians should also prepare grassroots citizens for societal changes which should help improve life in common by safeguarding the environment and creating decent conditions for the expression of social relations. Ultimately, from the enforcing shock of COVID-19, we must encourage parliaments in all countries to legislate better and prepare new paradigms that will make the world a better place. In this regard, we must welcome the happy initiative of Dr. Jahan Moon, the Mother of Peace, to organize the Rally of Hope in August 2020, an opportunity for eminent personalities of this world to transmit messages of peace and a new moral, ethical, and spiritual, economic, and cultural vision. In addition, we will never stop thanking her for the multifaceted support granted by the UPF for the cause of peace and the defense of human values, more than ever highlighted by the post-COVID-19 context. Thank you very much.
And thank you very much for that very, very inspiring observation. How interesting to look at the paradox of COVID-19. On the one hand, the catastrophic worsening of poverty and also social conditionings, but also some of the opportunities such as the Sustainable Development Goals, promoting democracy and fairness. Thank you so much, sir. That was fascinating. And now it is my distinct honor to introduce the Right Honorable Rebecca Kadaga, Speaker of the Parliament of Uganda. The floor is yours, Your Excellency.
A welcome from the equator, the land of the equator, the land of the source of the Nile. I welcome you to Uganda. I'm happy to see Mr. Barr. And I want to thank the Universal Peace Federation and all the participants for this first virtual international leadership conference. Early in the pandemic, there was a fear that Africa would be worst hit by this pandemic, but realities have shown resilience of the African continent and its people. There have been a number of infections and deaths, but not as high as on other continents. We are still waiting for research to find out what has caused the resilience, and I hope the research will inform our strategies for the future. It's true that several economies and individuals have suffered during the lockdown, both in the government sector, the private sector, and the informal sector. In Parliament alone, we lost over 2,000 hours of working time because we had a curfew and we had cut down on the amount of time we used to do our work. There has also been considerable unemployment, loss of employment, loss of income, loss of livelihoods in different sectors. But there have been opportunities as well. First, I think that the public health is going to become more crucial in the community. Regular hand washing, regular sanitization, I think those should be something that features that should continue so that we don't have to think whether to do them or not. So for me, that is a plus. Now, within our community, we have had a burst of innovations. I think Uganda will no longer import sanitizers because within the local industry, a lot of investment has been made to enable us to have our own sanitizers. The Ugandans are manufacturing masks, both in the big industries and the small scale industries. So there are a few opportunities there. But at the government level, I think we need to build resilient public health and social systems. We were caught off guard. I think we need to prepare better in the future to deal with pandemics. We should have sufficient isolation and quarantine facilities countrywide so that we will be ready. The responsibility of parliaments is high. Early in the pandemic, the Uganda Parliament established a task force to quickly look at the possible impact of the lockdown on the country, on the economy, and on the people. And our committee was able to come up with proposals for mitigation measures, stimulus packages, subsidies on utilities, and addressing loans and interest rates, which we passed on to the government for consideration. Parliament itself has changed. We no longer sit in our chamber. We sit in a marquee outside to facilitate social distancing, but also enable us to have fewer numbers, but do the same work. We also have to amend our rules of procedure to provide for virtual parliament. So our work is partially physical and partially virtual, and we were able to enact laws, including passing the budget in that format. Parliament has a big responsibility to ensure proper budgeting, but also to enact laws and policies for emergency responses. We have to be focused and work ahead. We also have a big responsibility on the issue of oversight to ensure that the resources we allot go to the right purpose and that they are able to make a difference in our communities. We also have a duty to work on issues of interstate mediation processes. As parliamentarians, I think we have a responsibility to do that. Now, we also have a new situation where, because of the lockdown, people have had to develop new careers, new things they were not doing before. This morning I had a group of teachers who told me that yes, they are teachers, but now they want to look at farming, they want to look at other things. So people are thinking more about what else they can do for the future. So all these we need to do in order to address the issue of import substitution, but also proper livelihoods. On the social level, there are mixed reactions. First, the physical interactions reduced and people moved into the digital era. But at the same time, the lockdown and the curfew made it possible for families to be together for longer hours. For some, it was good. For some, it was not so good. For some, it resulted in domestic violence. But all these are things that are happening during the lockdown. The very interesting thing in Uganda is that ordinarily, weddings in this country involve over 500 people. But now, because of the situation, weddings now have 10 people. So it has cut down the cost of the weddings, but also made it possible to do the same thing without 500 people attending. So I'm sure that in the future, not many Ugandans will have huge weddings of 500 people. Finally, we need to address, as parliamentarians, the utilization of the vast natural resources on this continent. This lockdown has told us that it's possible for us to do things for ourselves. There are things we used to get from China, there are things we used to get from different countries. I think now we need to address our research and our innovation to ensure that we use the natural resources of this continent to ensure that we do the things and add value within the African continent. So in all, yes, there has been a problem, but it has, I think it was a wake-up call so that we don't take life too much for granted. I want to thank Madam Moon and the Universal Peace Federation for giving us this opportunity to speak to one another. Thank you very much.
And thank you very much. That was absolutely fascinating. I love the emphasis on resilience and the necessity to not only oversight of resources, but also to really focus on what you have. And again, it does go along with what His Excellency Barr was saying regarding empowerment. And so that was very inspiring. Thank you so much. And I see that we do have the Honorable Kadyrov Omarov has been able to join us. And again, he's a member of the State Duma of Russia. Sir, the floor is yours.
I am glad to welcome everyone from Russia. And I appreciate the topic of our meeting seems to be so important for Russia. Of course, you know, last year we had a summit in Sochi initiated by President Putin, Vladimir Putin, and there were delegates from all over Africa, from 54 nations, and 45 nations were represented by the heads of state and heads of governments. At that time, they were discussed the issues of development on the African continent. In the past, Russia was very active in the cultural exchange in Africa, and Soviet Union in the past also provided a lot of humanitarian aid to African nations, and the relations between the African states and Russia remained. Last year we had a restart, but of course because of the pandemic and the troubles all over the world, and of course Africa is suffering too. Now Africa needs more assistance than in the past. Now Russia begins large-scale initiatives of help towards African nations, especially in relation to fighting COVID-19. In the area of education at the level of parliaments and the Russian government, we're increasing the quotas for African students to study in the Russian Federation so that the students would have good education at the universities. We have plenty of cultural delegations before the pandemic. Last year I was a member of the parliamentary delegation, also the Parliament of Tolerance, with the 64 countries represented. We gathered in Ethiopia and we were welcomed by high-level hosts in Ethiopia. We learned a lot about the great nation of Ethiopia, its culture, and I was so happy. This was my first time to visit Africa, and I saw how deep, how ancient this culture is and how important this culture is for the European continent. I absolutely agree to all who spoke today at our conference that we all must focus on assisting the development in Africa, especially developing business relations. Investing in Africa today is very effective. The countries where there is stability, where governments pay attention to developing business, these countries are so good for investments. And today Russians were traveling a lot to Africa, visiting as tourists and investing as businessmen. Therefore, after the pandemic, Russia will absolutely continue relations with the African nations and assisting them overcoming the consequences. Of course, meanwhile, I would like to say that the year 2020 is hard. It's tough and it's unexpected. None of us were expecting anything of the kind, and this will be historic. Maybe by the will of God, the Creator, we experience difficulties. Meanwhile, these difficulties will make us closer, will make us one, and we're one in understanding that Africa does need peace, same as the Middle East. In Africa, we expect people will find each other closer to each other, the nations will be more open, and people will support each other more and more. I definitely appreciate the representatives of many European countries who responded to the tragedy in Lebanon. The whole world united, saving the Lebanese, helping the nation after the great disaster. 15 years, Universal Peace Federation. Today we mark this day. This is a unique organization. In 2020, we mark this 15th year of UPF. And Dr. Moon, it's a centennial year for him, the founder of this organization. UPF helps so many NGOs and helps developing the cause of peace everywhere in the world. Therefore, this issue today is really, we should work together for the sake of world peace and to promote peace in Africa and development in Africa. Russia never colonized African continent. On the contrary, historically, we always helped the continent, and forever we stand strong to help Africa, lending our hand in our parliament. We expect new initiatives by the Russian president. We will take very active part in developing African continent. Thank you for your kind attention.
And thank you so much, sir, for joining us. And we're very grateful that you were able to come here. Well, we have had some really, really interesting perspectives, and thank you so much. Now, I can see that the chat has been going crazy with people asking many, many questions. What I would like to do, we have time just for one question for all of our speakers. And what I would like to ask is if you can keep the response to maybe a minute or 2 minutes. What people are saying is, I mean, clearly the deep importance of Africa has been communicated by all of our speakers, indeed the continent of the future, and some concrete steps, many possibly idealistic things have been proposed. What people are asking is, what's one or two the most important steps that you see moving forward, things that you personally are going to work on, or things that you just think are the most important thing in terms of empowering Africa? Who would like to go first?
Okay, yeah, I'll do it shortly. So as an Israeli community, as people who love Africa, we feel that we should think beyond ourselves and be part of a greater community that has a positive aspect on Africa, its potential, and the mission and vision to be able to work hand with hand with the people of Africa, not over their head, and be able to do great things together. What we mainly try to do, to your question, is to gather and unite the right people, unifying a very qualified communities across the world in order to empower Africa, while our aim is to unify, for example, leading companies in the world in sectors that support the empowerment of Africa and the people of Africa's ability to maximize their potential in Africa, and also to bring a lot of diverse experts in many sectors of importance. I personally believe, by the way, that Empower Africa is also about creating value in human connection. As an individual, for example, I can create value for you and also connect you with other people that maybe can add a lot of other value to you, maybe more than I can. And that's the whole idea. Our ability to connect people that can add more value to each other is what Empower Africa is all about. If there is a problem that needs, for example, an agricultural solution, we should get the best experts in the field of agriculture that can add tremendous value to the table. In other example, we just recently connected CEO of $1 billion company with local Africa companies, and that adds value, of course, to many other millions of people. So in summary, as non-African, the international community who wants to empower Africa, we are focusing on connecting people and optimizing the communication between them, while our goal is to helping people come into Africa in an ethical and transparent business manner, and then helping local companies to get international exposure and consequently attracting international investor that can support them. The diversity, the amazing diversity of Africa is powerful, very powerful, and Israel is known as an innovation hub, transforming sectors such as agriculture, health, high-tech, and education. And the question is how we are distributing this into other markets that needs it. And this is the most important thing, and this is what I think, to your question, we should all focus at. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much. So what I'm hearing is scaling diversity and human connection while optimizing communication and transparency. Sounds good, sounds good. Now I believe, Your Honorable Omara, please go ahead. It seems that you're very eager to speak.
Yeah.
Thank you. I totally agree to Mr. Bar from Israel. And I think the rest were speaking about the development of the continent. And the issue was about what is the most urgent. I want to draw your attention to the fact that the statistics, I think all of my colleagues here have access to the same data. If you don't have, we can share. As I understand, in comparison with the previous year, the number of the people starving in Africa doubled. Even now, while we are discussing these issues, this number is increasing drastically. So I would like to draw your attention, and the urgent measures really is relief for the children starving in many nations, and this great experience of Israel and other nations will be very helpful. We should all now unite to help Africa immediately. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, sir. So what I'm hearing is that without immediate humanitarian relief, there really cannot be as much done, and thank you for pointing that out. May I please invite our other speakers who would like to give a perspective on this? Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. For me, the answer is really one, invest in Africa. I think our friends should not use Africa as a source of raw materials. They should assist us to locate industries within the continent so that we are able to add value here. The second area is on social equity. This pandemic brought to light the interconnectedness of very small jobs. A taxi employs the taxi driver, the taxi conductor, the tout. There is someone who washes the taxi every day. There is someone who cooks for the taxi people every day. So there are about 9 jobs related to one taxi. So I think that access to credit is one of those things, especially for the small players who have been so badly affected by this pandemic. Thank you.
Well, that's exactly right. And so invest in Africa, absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much. And for our 2 other speakers, may I ask, would either of you like to share your thoughts?
Muito obrigado. Eu julgo
Thank you.
que a África precisa de reencontrar-se.
Africa needs to find itself. Pandemic with coronavirus made it clear to the world, and especially Africa, what are the capacities, what is the answer for the important questions that remain, especially in Africa. Africa needs to have her own agenda, its own agenda. And the formation and the way of creating a project of development on the basis of its needs and to end the political fights for power at any price, and need to delegate the rights of the social justice of the people. And second plan, Africa needs an agenda with the deadline to educate its children, to have people who are qualified and available in all levels. We need to structurate this workforce, precarious workforce. We need a unified workforce.
It's interesting how the theme of unity and unifying and transparency and new definitions of community are being repeated throughout many of these. Thank you so much, sir, for sharing your ideas on that. And what we would like to ask is, Your Excellency Husseini, would you like to share some ideas with us today?
Oui. Oui, merci, madame.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. So once again, thank you for the organization of this debate. I would like to find partial conclusions, because as we know, and in the past, after crisis, it's always innovations. The best time for innovation is during crisis. So Africa post-COVID isn't isolated from the rest of the world. Africa has to be analyzed in the international context post-COVID, with the redefinition of new norms of multilateralism, but most specifically values of solidarity, fraternity, justice, dignity has to be cultivated between Africans by reinforcement of sub-regional organization and African Union. As we say, help yourself and the heavens will help you. So Africa is behind in regard to technology. Africa is behind in investments. Africa is behind in education. And I think that from now on, to catch up, Africa has to redefine itself and redefine new objectives that are prioritizing these new areas that I spoke of. So the rest, the Marshall Plan, the international aid will only come to African efforts already put. So we have to understand that. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you once again to have given us the opportunity to pronounce on the future of the world, and specifically and especially on the future of Africa in this hard period that we are going through. But what we know, what we are told every time is we have to stay optimistic. So thank you very much for everything.
And thank you very much, sir. So what I'm finding so inspiring from our three speakers from Africa is the idea of, exactly as you said, to redefine oneself with values and new objectives. But you three are so inspiring. And I'm sure that, you know, the contributions that individually and together, and again, in cooperation with others, such as in Russia and in Israel, the sky's the limit in a very positive way. Now, I realize that we are coming towards the end of our time here of this fascinating session. As indicated at the beginning, we do have Mr. Peter Heider, who is going to give us some perspectives on IAPP. So Peter, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Heather. Thank you that you guided us nicely through this discussion. Distinguished panelists, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. For me, as a European, it is very valuable to hear these voices from Africa, from the Middle East, and from Russia. They are good for the European mind and also for the European soul. This is how I perceive them. As I represent the Universal Peace Federation, I want to say that it worked closely with parliamentarians from around the world to build a world of lasting peace based on universal principles from the beginning. The founders of the Universal Peace Federation, Reverend Dr. Sun Myung Moon and Dr. Hak Jahan Moon, launched the Parliamentarians for Peace initiative already in 2001. But then in 2016, it became a major project of UPF, and inauguration meetings were held first in Korea and then around the world, in all continents and in many nations. Also in Vienna, we had our inauguration in September 2017 on the topic Perspectives for Sustainable Peace in Europe in the light of the refugee crisis. You can see the United Nations building behind me, and also you see the blue Danube. So Africa has the blue Nile and Europe has the blue Danube, so we are connected. As we know, our world faces territorial disputes, religious and racial conflicts, environmental degradation, climate change, violent extremism, poverty, hunger, nuclear proliferation and corruption. so many problems. Each of these are serious threats to human development and to realization of a world of peace. So especially parliamentarians, because they are faced always with the most immediate problems, because they are brought to their attention, know all these things, especially on the national level. And also we should not forget, as our organization comes from Korea, that the Korean peninsula still remains divided. Even today, 70 years after the beginning of the Korean War, the citizens of the peninsula are still waiting for the moment to communicate or freely travel in their homeland from north to south or from south to north. So we should always be aware that this is one task to support, that Korea can be again a country where people can freely travel and communicate. Parliamentarians for Peace are challenged to identify a number of issues. First, address the root causes of problems by engaging in and encouraging self-reflection and self-evaluation. So self-reflection and self-evaluation. Second, combat corruption through the exercise of their vote on various budgetary issues and by supporting not only traditional academic education, but also values education. So very important for us, values education. Third, work to establish bipartisan peace-building committees, bipartisan. Fourth, in nations and regions where conflict is endemic and people have lost hope for genuine peace, conduct ambassadors for peace programs and seminars to rebuild hope and confidence. Rebuild hope and confidence in such situations. And to work on fifth across sectors and as groups to eradicate corruption that knows no boundaries. Work across sectors. And six, support the partnership between religion and politics as a substantive means to target daily behavior for real transparency. So very much important for UPF, partnership between religion and politics. I want to finish my short statement with words which the founder of our IAPP, the International Association of Parliamentarians for Peace, Dr. Haksha Hanmoon, spoke in London in September 2016 at the inauguration of IAPP Europe and Middle East. And she said, in building an eternal world of peace, each nation's political leaders must possess a moral character and follow ethical values and the voice of the conscience. The world will change when the world's politicians and parliamentarians unite and cooperate for the sake of peace. And I would like to add, as somebody who comes from a city of the United Nations, in line with the Sustainable Development Goals, so nicely and fundamentally developed by the United Nations. We, the people of the world, today should be united, that this world can develop according to the Sustainable Development Goals and that we can unite and cooperate for the sake of peace. Thank you very much.
And thank you very, very much, Peter Heider, for those inspiring words. So in closing, may I once again express deep thanks to all of our esteemed speakers for having shared your insights with us today in this International Association of Parliamentarians for Peace session on Africa, Continent of the Future. Many, many thanks also to those across the world who have joined us in this session of the Universal Peace Federation's International Leadership Conference 2020. May we remind you that session 4, featuring the Interreligious Association for Peace and Development, will take place in approximately 20 minutes. The session will be on the topic of perspectives from religious and spiritual leaders, and it promises to be fascinating. This is Heather Vokush wishing you a fruitful and engaging conference. Thank you again.